I've been a detective for nearly 20 years, and I've seen my share of the twisted and the tragic. But something about this case felt heavier. Like the silence in that church wasn't just about grief. It was about secrets, ancient, quiet, and suffocating. I got the call on a Wednesday morning. Crisp autumn air, sun just breaking through the haze, and I was halfway through my first coffee. The voice on the other end belonged to Officer Moore. St. Augustine's. You'll want to come down here, detective. It's, unusual. Unusual usually means messy. I grabbed my coat and headed out. St. Augustine's wasn't just any church. It was old, brick and oak, with stained glass that caught the light like it was holding fire. It sat on a hill, watching over the town like a weary guardian. The kind of place people came to cry, confess, and sometimes to hide. When I arrived, yellow tape already wrapped around the entrance. Paramedics stood by idly. A couple of officers looked pale, and then I saw the body. Father Thomas. He lay just beneath the altar steps, face turned toward the wooden crucifix that loomed over the sanctuary, robes torn, head bloodied. But what struck me more than the sight was the stillness, like the whole church was holding its breath. Moore stepped beside me, face stiff. Witness says he jumped from the choir loft. Early morning prayer session. Only one person here saw it, a volunteer. She's shaken up. I nodded, still staring at the Peter's body. Any surveillance? Nothing inside, just a motion camera outside, which only caught him entering last night. Convenient. Too convenient. Where's the witness? In the side chapel, name's Evelyn Brooks, mid-30s, comes in to clean candles, prep hymns, says she heard a sound, looked up, and saw him falling. I made my way to the chapel. The scent of incense lingered, and a woman sat hunched over in one of the pews. She clutched a rosary like it was the only thing holding her together. "Ms. Brooks?" I asked gently. She looked up, eyes red-rimmed, lips trembling. "He didn't scream," she whispered. "He didn't cry out. He just fell, like he had accepted it." "Did you see anyone else in the church? Any movement in the loft before he fell?" She shook her head. "Number just him." He walked up calmly. I thought he was going to rehearse for Sunday. I scribbled notes. Her story was too clean, too calm. "Did he seem distressed recently? Worried, agitated?" She hesitated. "No more than usual. He always carried the weight of people's sins. He listened. He forgave. He prayed for everyone. But he looked tired." I stepped out after thanking her. Back in the nave, I looked up at the choir loft. It was a long fall, 20 feet at least, stone floor below, no railing broken, just the echo of silence. I climbed the stairs slowly. Dust lined the banister. A single chair sat near the edge, facing inward. A hymnal open on the floor, and near the ledge, scuff marks. He didn't fall cleanly. He might have struggled. "Moore," I called. "I want prints from the loft, fast. Also, get me Father Thomas's background. I want finances, parish records, recent complaints, emails, everything." He raised an eyebrow. "You think this isn't a suicide?" I looked back down at the altar. Maybe it is, but if it is, someone pushed him there without laying a finger. I visited the sacristy next, a small room tucked behind the altar where vestments and chalices were stored. Clean, ordered. But something about it felt staged. Inside one of the drawers, beneath folded linens, I found a folder. Not hidden, but not exactly out in the open either. Inside, donation records, handwritten notes, and one envelope labeled in red ink, "Confessions." It was sealed. I didn't open it. Not yet, but I slid it into my coat. As I left the church, the sky had turned gray. A wind picked up, rattling the stained glass. And I couldn't help but feel that Father Thomas wasn't the only one carrying sins. Let me tell you something I've learned. The truth rarely screams, it whispers. And in that church, it was whispering everywhere. Silence can be comforting in a place like a church. It's supposed to be peaceful, sacred. But that morning, walking through the empty pews of St. Augustine's, it didn't feel like peace. It felt like hiding. Like everyone, living or dead, had something to keep quiet about. I started my rounds with the parish staff. No official interrogation, just questions, light conversation, a chance to read the room. You learn a lot that way. People try to look helpful when they're nervous. First was Margaret, the church secretary. 60-ish, thick glasses, ran the place like a fortress. I found her in the office sorting papers with robotic precision. Father Thomas was beloved, she said without me asking. He gave everything to this place. He worked late, counseled the troubled, visited the sick. He cared. That's more than I can say for most. She didn't look up once while speaking, just folded bulletins, one after another. Did he ever mention feeling overwhelmed or worried about something? She hesitated. He worried about everything. He took it all personally. The broken heater, the donations being down, even people leaving early after Mass. He thought it meant he failed them. And anyone he didn't get along with? A beat. She paused, finally looking me in the eye. Some people struggle with grace. They see kindness as weakness. And Father Thomas never raised his voice, ever. Next was James Nolan, the choir director. Late 30s, flamboyant energy, always moving. He showed me the music room like he was guiding a museum tour. He wasn't perfect, James said, plucking dust off a piano lid. But he was kind, maybe too kind. How do you mean? Some of us wanted changes, new music, more community events. But he always deferred, said tradition mattered more. It was frustrating sometimes, like talking to a wall. I asked if they ever argued. Sure, but I'd never wish harm on him. He just didn't always hear us. Hearing. That word kept coming up. Then came Joseph Ruiz, the janitor. Quiet man, ex-con, mid-40s, kept mostly to himself. Father Thomas had personally hired him years ago. Said everyone deserved redemption. Do you think he jumped? I asked him. Joseph looked down at the broom in his hands. I don't know. He looked tired, yeah, but not broken. He still smiled at me Monday morning. Anyone act strange lately? Hang around the church at odd hours? Joseph nodded slowly. There was this guy, young, white hoodie, came around during evening services but didn't go inside. Just sat on the steps. I told Father once, but he said, let him be. The church is open to all. You ever talk to him? Number. But he stared a lot, like he was watching something only he could see. By the time I made it back to the rectory, the sun had dipped behind clouds again. I stood in Father Thomas's bedroom, clean, uncomfortably so. On the nightstand, a Bible, a pair of reading glasses, and a small, leather-bound journal. The journal wasn't locked, but it was guarded. Every page was dated, neat, and meticulous. Most entries were mundane, sermon drafts, prayer notes, names of the sick. But a week ago, I found something different. I feel a darkness approaching, not evil, but heavy, like old wood ready to crack. I pray for strength, but I fear my strength isn't enough this time. It wasn't the words, it was the tone, like he'd already made peace with losing. I pocketed the journal. Back at the station, I laid everything out. Notes, photos, interviews. I played the scene over and over in my head. A priest climbs to the choir loft early in the morning and falls to his death. No camera, one witness, no scream. And a sealed envelope labeled Confessions still unopened in my coat pocket. I sat for a long time before I opened it. Inside were handwritten sheets, not his handwriting, several letters, some dated months ago, others recent. They weren't addressed to Father Thomas, but about him. I don't trust him. He looks at people like he sees right through them. He told me to forget. I can't. What he knows, what he's hiding, it's not holy. He said silence was forgiveness, but that's not what it feels like. Anonymous complaints, whispers on paper, nothing concrete, just unease, mistrust, but enough to rattle anyone. Enough to push someone toward the edge, or enough for someone to push him. Next morning, I got a call from the coroner. Toxicology was clean. Cause of death, blunt force trauma consistent with a fall. No signs of a struggle, no bruises, no defensive wounds. but I couldn't shake it, not yet. I returned to the church once more, alone, cold wind through the open doors. I walked up to the loft, stood where he must have stood, looked down. Then I noticed something carved into the wood rail. Not fresh, faint, almost invisible unless the light hit it right. 3 words. He knew everything. There's a kind of silence that feels holy, and there's another that feels like rot. What I felt standing in that choir loft was the second kind. There's a difference between a lie and a secret. Lies are loud, messy. They take energy to keep alive. But secrets are quiet. They live in silence. And in churches like St. Augustine's, silence is sacred. It gives secrets the perfect place to hide. I spent the next few days knee-deep in paper, financial reports, parish complaints, archived sermons, donation ledgers, anything that could give me insight into Father Thomas's life. The man had lived modestly, kept no major debts, no red flags. But the deeper I dug, the more the clean image started to crack. A name popped up repeatedly: Bishop Alan Merrick, a superior based 2 counties over. The two had exchanged dozens of emails over the past year. Most were boring: event schedules, parish coordination, but one stood out. I strongly recommend we put the Montrose matter to rest. We've done enough. The Montrose matter? The name rang a bell. I checked local records. 7 years ago, a teenage boy, Elliot Montrose, filed a complaint against an unnamed church figure. It never made it to court. Settled privately, no one charged. Case sealed. But the file I found, buried under layers of bureaucracy, listed the church involved, St. Augustine's. And the priest serving there at the time? Father Thomas. I needed to speak with someone who had been there during that time. Evelyn Brooks had mentioned she started volunteering about 10 years ago. I called her in again. She looked nervous this time. Not grief-stricken, more watchful. "Do you remember a boy named Elliot Montrose?" I asked. She blinked. "Yes, quiet. Came with his grandmother sometimes. Around 15, maybe. Did anything happen?" She shifted. There were whispers that he'd accused someone, but nothing came of it. People assumed it was made up. "And what did you think?" She hesitated. "I think the church has a way of protecting itself, and people like me, we're taught not to ask questions." I nodded slowly. "And Father Thomas?" "I don't know what happened, but I know he was never the same after that. More withdrawn, like he was carrying a shadow no one could see." I tracked down Elliot, now 22, living in a rough part of town, working nights at a mechanic's shop. He agreed to meet, reluctantly. He sat across from me in a diner, fidgeting with a coffee stir. "You here to reopen the case?" he asked, eyes guarded. "I'm here because Father Thomas is dead, and I think someone wanted it that way." Elliot stared out the window for a long moment. Then, "You ever been in a room where you feel something wrong, but no one else does?" That was him, always kind, always smiling, but something behind his eyes. He didn't finish. "Did he ever hurt you, Elliot?" He met my gaze. "Number, but I think he wanted to. Or maybe I thought he did. I don't know anymore." "What happened after you reported it?" "My grandma begged me to drop it, said the church would protect him no matter what. I wasn't even sure what I was accusing him of, just that I felt watched, like I was being studied." He paused. "But after that, he started avoiding me, and I never stepped inside a church again." I left the diner with more questions than answers. Was Elliot telling the truth? Was he protecting something or someone? Or had something darker happened, hidden by fear and faith? Back at the station, I reread the confessions. One stood out now. He said I was forgiven before I even spoke. But how can someone forgive what they don't let you name? It chilled me. That night I returned to St. Augustine's one last time. The church was empty, echoing. I walked slowly toward the altar. The stained glass seemed darker, the air heavier. In the sacristy, I found Joseph, the janitor, kneeling on the floor, scrubbing something invisible. He didn't look up when I entered. "You don't have to clean what isn't dirty," I said softly. He paused. Old habits. Can I ask you something, Joseph? He nodded. Did Father Thomas ever confess to you? Silence, then, number. But he came here a lot, late at night, just sat, like he was waiting for someone to talk to him. Do you think he was guilty of something? Another pause. I think he was afraid of dying with it still in him. In my line of work, you chase facts, evidence, witnesses, but some cases, you only get shadows, whispers, and choices that can't be undone. Was Father Thomas guilty? Maybe. Was he innocent? Maybe. But someone wanted him silenced. Or maybe he silenced himself before anyone else could. And the truth? The truth is heavy. Sometimes it doesn't fall with a scream. It drops with a prayer. Some deaths feel inevitable. Others, like a thread was cut mid-stitch. Too abrupt, too clean. Father Thomas's death didn't feel like either. It felt unresolved, like a question no one wanted to ask out loud. And now it was my job to answer it. I went back to the beginning, back to the day the body hit the stone floor beneath the altar. What had I missed? Who stood to gain from his death? What, if anything, had truly pushed him over the edge? I started cross-referencing names. Evelyn Brooks, James Nolan, Margaret the secretary, Joseph the janitor, and then the boy in the hoodie. Joseph had mentioned him, and I hadn't followed up. No name, no photo, just an image. A young man in a white hoodie, sitting on the steps, watching like he belonged to a different world. I reviewed the outside surveillance footage again, frame by frame, and there he was, same white hoodie, same blank stare. Appeared 6 times over the course of 2 months, always alone, always at twilight, never entered the church. Just sat and looked up at the stained glass. Then 3 days before the incident, he vanished. I showed the footage to Joseph. That's him, he said, nodding slowly. That's the one. I filed a request to pull traffic camera footage from the nearby street. It took a day, but luck was on my side. One clip caught him leaving on foot, heading toward the old neighborhood on the east side. That part of town had seen better days. Shuttered stores, graffiti-tagged walls, and buildings where time had stopped caring. After knocking on a dozen doors, I found him. Name, Daniel Reed, 19, dropped out of high school, lived with his aunt, kept to himself. He answered the door with guarded eyes, not surprised, not hostile, just wary. I'm not in trouble, am I? He asked. Not yet, I said. Mind if we talk? We sat outside, 2 broken chairs on a rusted porch. He didn't offer excuses, didn't ask what this was about, just waited. You used to sit outside St. Augustine's, I said. Why? His gaze stayed fixed ahead. Because it was quiet, and because he was there. Father Thomas? He nodded. He helped my mom once. She used to go to that church when I was a kid. She was struggling, drugs mostly. He got her into rehab, helped her get clean. For a while it worked. What happened? She relapsed, died 2 years ago. I'm sorry, he shrugged. He said he'd check on me, said I could come to him, but I never did. Then one day I saw him again, and I couldn't stop watching. What were you watching for? A long silence. Then, I wanted to believe in something again. He didn't give me any bombshells, no dramatic revelations, but something about the way he said it, that quiet desperation for faith, for meaning, it stayed with me. Back at the station, I reviewed everything again. The journal, the confession letters, the email about Montrose, the quote carved into the wood. He knew everything. What did it mean? I went to see Bishop Merrick. He met me in his office. High ceilings, heavy drapes, a crucifix hanging behind his desk like a sentinel. I won't pretend to be surprised, he said. I heard you've been asking questions. I'm trying to understand why a priest who was supposedly loved and respected jumped from a choir loft without a word. Or was pushed, he added flatly. I watched him closely. What was the Montrose matter really? He sighed. It was a mistake, a painful one. We tried to help that family, to offer spiritual support. But people see shadows where they want to. That sounds like deflection. That sounds like survival, detective. The church has endured for centuries. We deal with sin, yes, but we do not wear it on our sleeves. Thomas, he wore everything, every guilt, every failure, every whisper. He let it rot inside him. I didn't respond. I didn't need to, because that's when I realized maybe there wasn't a single person who pushed him. Maybe everyone did. A little, with silence, with denial, with misplaced faith. A week later, we closed the case. Official ruling, suicide. No evidence of foul play, no charges filed. It felt wrong, but it also felt true. The kind of truth no courtroom could ever contain. At the funeral, the pews were full. People cried, people prayed, people remembered a man who had stood for something. But I sat in the back, watching them all, watching Evelyn as she gripped her rosary, watching James stare at the organ pipes, watching Joseph wipe his hands again and again on an already clean handkerchief. And I thought about Daniel and Elliot and every broken person who walked through those doors hoping for salvation. Maybe Father Thomas had tried to carry it all. Maybe it crushed him. Maybe that was the price of grace. The final entry in his journal read, "Lord, if I fall, let it be into your mercy." I hope he did, because in the end, the truth wasn't what killed him. It was the weight of carrying it alone.